The moment our hands brushed, I realized some doors inside us open quietly and cannot be closed again. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a choice, one that could destroy everything. I'm Slayer, 42 years old, and what happened between me and someone who had been a part of my family for years still haunts me to this day. When my husband left for another long trip, I thought I'd just feel lonely. I never imagined I'd feel seen or that I would cross a line I could never uncross. Have you ever faced a moment where you knew, even before it happened, that it would change you forever? Tell me your thoughts. I'm ready to hear your truth too. I had never imagined my life would take such a quiet turn. A 42-year-old woman standing in the middle of a picture-perfect home, yet never had the feeling of being invisible, felt so stark. My husband, who once was the center of this world, had now become just a name on a travel itinerary. Business trips stretched from one day to the next, week after week, and his returns felt less like reunions and more like mere acknowledgments of presence. We still spoke, a few polite exchanges about work, about bills, about the weather. But between us, there was now a gap too wide to bridge. The intimacy, the casual touches, the moments when a glance was enough to understand each other, all of it seemed to belong to another lifetime. I kept the house immaculate, kept the garden on the front porch blooming through the seasons, kept my smile bright and full whenever I met the neighbors. But no one knew that every night, when the door was shut, all that remained was a fading version of myself. When my husband informed me that he would be leaving again, this time for nearly a month, I simply smiled and nodded. And I didn't question him, didn't plead, didn't resent him. I had grown too used to accepting, or at least I thought I had. There are small cracks we believe will never grow until one day they open wide enough that they can no longer be hidden. And I stood at the edge of that chasm, not knowing that even a gentle breeze would be enough to push me over. A week after my husband left, Liam returned. He was 23 years old, tall, calm, with a smile that still carried a trace of youthful innocence. Even though the outlines of maturity had begun to settle on him, something I had never really noticed before. I had cared for Liam since he was just a middle schooler, a gentle but bounded relationship, as if we lived under the same roof, but each kept a sky of our own. This time, something was different. When Liam stepped through the door, pulling his suitcase behind him and his hair tousled from the spring wind, I suddenly felt the house brighten just a little. A warm, vibrant light, the kind of feeling I had forgotten. "Hello, Miss Claire," Liam said, his voice deeper and warmer than I remembered. "Hello, dear," I replied, smiling, trying to hide the sudden awkwardness that came with realizing just how much the young boy before me had grown. We quickly fell back into our familiar rhythm, cooking together, tidying up, watching old movies every night. Small things, but enough to fill the emptiness a little. But in those small moments, I began to notice something changing. Sometimes I caught Liam's gaze lingering longer than usual. A casual brush of hands as we carried dishes to the kitchen made my heart skip a beat. An offhand compliment, "You look beautiful today," left me so flustered I had to turn away, hiding a clumsy smile behind my coffee cup. I told myself, "Don't think anything of it, Claire. It's just the misunderstanding of a lonely woman." But I couldn't deny that those tiny things, whether accidental or intentional, were touching places inside me that had long been left untouched. One late afternoon, as the golden sunset bathed the backyard, Liam sat beside me on the porch steps. "You know," he said, his voice as soft as the breeze, "I've always admired how you keep everything steady, even when no one's around." I looked up at Liam, and in his eyes, I saw something different. Not the naive admiration of a boy, but understanding, appreciation, and a loneliness mirroring my own, searching for someone to recognize it. I felt the walls I had built around myself for so many years suddenly grow thin. I should have looked away. I should have broken the moment with a light joke, but instead I just sat there, silent, letting myself, for the first time in a long while, not resist. The sun sank slowly, leaving a tender hush over everything. And in that moment, I knew Something had begun, quietly and irreversibly. That night, it rained. The rain came suddenly, pouring onto the roof in a soft, steady murmur, like the earth itself was sighing. I was cleaning up the kitchen when the lights flickered a few times before going out completely. A power outage, right on the first rainy night of the season. I rummaged through a drawer and found a few small candles. As I was struggling to light them, Liam walked in, holding two glasses of red wine. I thought you might need this, Liam said with a smile, his eyes glowing with warmth. I took the glass from him, my hand brushing lightly against his, a simple touch. But in the flickering candlelight, it became something that could no longer be called simple. We sat down in the living room, candles placed on the table, their soft golden light reflecting in Liam's eyes. The rain beat against the window panes, creating a background music for the growing silence between us. I sipped my wine, trying to appear calm, but inside I could hear the frantic pounding of my own heart. Then Liam spoke, his voice low and sincere. I know I probably shouldn't say this. I turned to look at him, my hand tightening slightly around my glass. But do you know, Liam continued, you're the most beautiful woman I've ever known. Not just because of how you look, but because of the way you exist, strong, gentle, and yet so achingly alive. I read his words in my heart, the one that had felt dry and barren for so many years, suddenly ached as if it had been touched for the first time. What a laugh to lighten the mood. I want to stand up. I would make some excuse to leave the room. But instead, I whispered, barely audible. Thank you, Liam. A full, swelling silence stretched between us. Not awkward, not fearful, but heavy with all the things left unsaid. Lane set his glass down, his eyes never leaving mine. And before my rational mind could intervene, he reached a steady hand, slowly finding mine. I didn't pull away. I let him. That gentle brush, just fingertips meeting, was enough to send a tremor through my entire body as if the whole universe had shifted. The rain kept falling, filling the silence. Outside, the world went on, unaware that inside that small house, something had quietly taken root. Fragile, forbidden, but undeniable. I knew in that moment that we had crossed an invisible line. One accidental touch, and from there would be no going back. The next morning, the house was steeped in an unfamiliar silence. I woke early, my footsteps light as I made my way to the kitchen, as if afraid to shatter the fragile air still lingering from the night before. The faint morning sunlight streamed through the windows, highlighting the rainwater still glistening on the wooden floor. I brewed a pot of coffee by hand, my heart twisting as I thought about the way Liam had looked at me last night, not like a boy admiring a figure from his childhood, but like a man looking at a woman he desired. Soft footsteps echoed behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know it was Liam. Did you sleep okay? His voice was slightly hoarse, carrying the weight of a night filled with restless thoughts. I nodded, lying to both him and myself. Yeah, well, enough. It. We sat across from each other at the dining table, the coffee cups untouched between us. The earth was so thick it could be felt with every breath. Try to steer the conversation elsewhere, asking Liam about his summer plans, about his studies. Answered politely, but those eyes, they stayed the same, still looking at me as if I were the only thing that existed in the room. And I began to crave that gaze in a way that scared me. That afternoon, a sudden downpour returned. I stood by the window, watching the raindrops race down the glass, my mind tangled in a fierce, restless struggle. Liam approached, standing just behind me. I could feel his warmth so close that if I leaned back even slightly, we would touch. Miss Claire, he whispered, so softly it was almost just a breath against my ear. I've never seen anyone look so beautifully sad. I turned around, meaning to make a joke to lighten the heavy atmosphere, but when I looked into Liam's eyes, the words caught in my throat. Like we sat so close that I could feel my heartbeat echoing between the sliver of space left between us. I should have stepped. I had to step back. But instead, I closed my eyes and surrendered to the deep yearning to be seen, truly seen, for who I was beyond the years of silence. Liam's hand brushed mine, a silent, wordless moment where two lonelinesses briefly recognized each other. I answered by leaning into him. The moment between us was filled with hesitation and emotion, a fragile breaking point where the walls we built could no longer hold. Fierce and desperate, as if we were trying to fill all the years of loneliness, restraint, and forgotten longing. In that moment, I no longer felt invisible. I was simply a woman, seen, remembered, alive. We pulled away from each other, breathless, overwhelmed by what had just happened. I took a shaky step back. We shouldn't, I whispered, my voice breaking. Damn, didn't hard you. He just nodded. But his eyes, those eyes, stayed locked on mine, tethering me with an invisible string. I knew no matter how hard I tried, I would never be able to break. That evening passed in silence. Liam and I avoided each other as if even a single glance would be enough to shatter everything, to sweep away the last fragile boundaries still left between us. I sat curled up in the living room, a thin blanket draped loosely over my shoulders. Outside, the rain kept falling heavily, each drop tapping against the windows like it was hammering at the growing unease. Inside me, Liam came down from upstairs, slow and hesitant. He sat on the chair across from me, the space between us just wide enough to restrain and just narrow enough to ache for more. No one spoke. Only the sound of rain, the wind, and the erratic pounding of my heart filled the room. At last, Liam broke the silence. Miss Claire. His voice was low, rough. I'm sorry. I should have had more self-control. I clutched the blanket tighter around me, my heart twisting painfully. No, I whispered, it wasn't just you. The words escaped before I could even think. I didn't want to place blame. I couldn't pretend I was innocent. Liam's eyes met mine, not with the impulsiveness of a young boy, but with the gaze of a man who fully owned his actions. I don't want you to feel guilty, Liam continued, his hands clenching over his knees. But I can't pretend nothing happened. I can't go back to the way it was. I bit my lip, feeling the pain rise in my chest. I understood he was right. I couldn't either. I had crossed a line I once swore I would never even approach. But at the same time, for the first time in years, I had truly felt alive, instead of quietly existing next to a man who had long since stopped seeing me. I took a deep breath, searching inside myself for some shred of reason still left. You'll be going back to school soon, I said, my voice trembling slightly. Things, they'll return to normal. Liam stayed silent. He nodded, but his eyes betrayed him, full of a sadness so deep it squeezed my heart. Can we pretend nothing ever happened? He asked, almost a whisper. I looked at him, and I knew I couldn't lie. No, I whispered back. We can never go back. Not because of the kiss, not because of the clumsy touches, but because we had seen each other in a place so deep that no one else had ever tried to reach. That night, I didn't. I sat by the window, watching the endless rainfall, wondering where my life would drift after tonight. Liam didn't sleep either. I heard his quiet footsteps pacing the hallway, stopping right outside my door. That didn't happen, but he didn't open it. He just stood there, like a silent apology, a wordless regret. I hugged myself, tears streaming down my face, unstoppable. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I only knew we had lost the old peace. And neither of us, neither Liam nor I, could ever turn back. The next morning, I woke up to a house filled with an uncanny silence. The rain had stopped. Only streaks of water clung to the windows, reflecting the dull gray sky. I walked down to the kitchen, following the familiar habit of making myself a cup of coffee. The warmth from the mug seeped into my palms, but it wasn't enough to chase away the cold curling tightly inside my chest. Lita had been up early. He was, we was sitting on the porch steps, his suitcase packed and waiting beside him. I stood by the window, watching him, my heart tightening painfully. There were no goodbyes gentle enough for a parting like this. No way to wipe clean everything that had happened. When I stepped outside, Liam looked up. Let's go. His voice caught in his throat. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I know everything will be harder after today, Liam continued, each word carving itself into the heavy morning air. But I will never forget what it felt like to really see you. I bit my lip, fighting back the tears threatening to spill. Thank you, I whispered, for reminding me that I'm still someone who can feel. We stood there in the small yard mottled with weak sunlight, silently holding each other's gaze. No bugs, no promises, because we both knew some of the most beautiful things are the ones that can never be named. When the taxi carrying Liam disappeared beyond the line of trees, I turned back into the house, feeling as if a part of me had left with him. All that remained were the empty rooms and the memory of someone who had made me remember I was still capable of love, even if only for a fleeting moment. 2 days later, my husband returned from his business trip. He walked into the house with a souvenir bag in hand and a tired smile on his face. I got you some chocolates at the airport, he said, placing the bag on the table. I smiled, mechanically, and watched as he busied himself with his luggage, his phone, his schedule. He didn't notice the change in my eyes. He didn't see that I was different. He didn't realize that my heart had stopped waiting for him a long time ago, longer than the months he had been away. That evening, we had dinner together, just like before. Silent, polite, empty. And in that silence, I understood that my life would continue, but it would never be the same again. I had touched something no one could ever take back. The feeling of being seen, of being touched, of living true to myself. And even if I had to endure this loneliness for the rest of my life, I would not forget. I would not forget Liam. I would not forget myself. I would not forget that there had been a time when my heart had awakened, even if the price for it was a lifetime of silent memory. The day Liam truly left wasn't just the moment he stepped off that porch. It was when his final message appeared on my phone. Please take care of yourself. Don't forget you are worthy of being loved. I read and reread those words, my hands trembling, my heart crammed with emotions I couldn't voice. I knew we couldn't stay in contact. We couldn't maintain anything of that fragile yet fierce bond because its very existence, no matter how beautiful, could only survive in silence and regret. I sat on the chair in the living room, the spacious, elegant, and utterly empty room. My husband was busy planning his next trip. He still didn't notice that my eyes had changed. Didn't see the quiet shattering I struggled to hide beneath the shell of the obedient wife. I tapped my fingers lightly on the table, my gaze drifting toward the window where the garden flowers had begun to wither under the late sun. The feeling of loss needed no witness. It gnawed away silently from within, piece by piece, breath by breath. And the cruelest part was, I couldn't blame anyone. I couldn't blame Liam. I couldn't blame my husband. I couldn't blame age, loneliness, or endless business trips. I could only blame myself for allowing hope to slip in. Maybe what Liam and I shared had always been just a moment of being lost, a fragile beam of light in a long, lonely night. Something beautiful, but with no place in this reality. That night, as the house sank into darkness, I stood before the mirror, staring deep into my own eyes. I had lost a part of myself, the innocence, the false sense of safety I had once clung to, but I had also reclaimed something I had long forgotten. A woman who still knew how to yearn, to feel, to hurt, and to live. No more Liam, no more hesitant touches, no more eyes that saw through me like no one ever had. Only me facing myself alone. And this time, I wasn't afraid. Because even though my heart had cracked, I knew I would never again become the woman who quietly faded away in this house. I had awakened, and no one, not even myself, could take that away. It's just like the worst thing was losing the person you loved. But now I understand. The deeper pain is losing yourself in someone else's forgetting. Liam is gone, but what he left behind is an awakening. I no longer live just to exist. I will learn to fill the empty spaces with my own courage. And this time, I won't let anyone, not even loneliness itself, make me disappear ever again. If you have ever experienced moments of awakening, when someone, even if they only passed briefly through your life, made you see yourself differently, please share it with me. Do you believe that sometimes the ones who don't stay are the ones who change us the most? I would truly love to hear your story, your thoughts, or even just a fleeting feeling. Because sometimes it's the smallest shares that touch the deepest parts of the heart.